The Denver Broncos are preparing for their first game with Jarrett Stidham in Sean Payton's offense as their starting quarterback. But what will it look like if Stidham is without one of his top receiving options this week? We'll break all that down and much more here. Today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Broncos are hoping they can get steady with it this Sunday as they host the Los Angeles Chargers on New Year's Eve. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Obviously, I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports, joined alongside by Sayre, Bedinger, site expert, PutOnTheOrange.com. Just a reminder, Broncos Country, thank you so much for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. Every single day, you can get this podcast for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And on top of that, today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there, LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, Sayre, as we kind of opened up with it there, the Broncos are hoping they can get steady with it here on Sunday against the Chargers, but that also might be hard because the Broncos could potentially be without two receiving options for him, which makes the task a little bit more challenging.
Yes, absolutely, Cody. I mean, wow, when you drop a reference like that with Will Smith, my mind immediately races to how can I relate this to the slap of Chris Rock? Maybe the Broncos will go out and slap the Chargers like Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. Is it okay to joke about that? Are we at the point of joking about that? That's okay. All right, cool. Well, no, Cody, I mean, you're right. It's absolutely going to be tough for Stidham if he doesn't have Courtland Sutton or Marvin Mims, for that matter, both popping up on the injury report. Although we know Courtland Sutton, he was working on the side field on Thursday, as you saw at practice, kind of trying to get through that concussion protocol. I'm sure Sutton wants to continue to add touchdowns to his total this season and set some personal goals for himself, maybe get to those Pro Bowl games, which, by the way, I'm going to be in Orlando at Disney World that time the Pro Bowl games are overlapping there. So maybe I'll see Courtland Sutton in Orlando at that point. But Cody, I really hope he can play because we want to see Jarrett Stidham with a full complement of receivers and playmakers at his disposal. Now, also, we want to see Courtland Sutton stay healthy. We don't want any more concussions or any more, trauma to the brain, things like that. So hopefully he's able to play. Hopefully he's able to clear concussion protocol. But as of Thursday, seems still kind of working his way through.
And Friday's practice here today, I think, is going to be very, very big for him. Look, if 2 consecutive DNPs isn't a promising sign. If he gets upgraded to limited in Friday's practice, maybe a little bit of optimism. Can he clear those final hurdles? They'll obviously have a walkthrough on Saturday. But even at this point, I don't know, Sayre, at right now we can definitively say, okay, hey, Jarrett Stidham, he's going to have Courtland Sutton to throw to here on Sunday. So I think the Broncos, I think they're bracing a little bit for the possibility that he may miss this game here, and he's not the only one as well in concussion protocol. Outside linebacker Baron Browning popped up onto it this week. We found that out on Wednesday from Sean Payton. So he was a DNP on Wednesday and Thursday, did not see him on the side field. So it doesn't look good as if Baron's going to be ready for this week's game here. But Sayre, this is where maybe some good news pops in for the Broncos. Nick Bonitto, I think, is expected to play here. He was limited on Wednesday, upgraded to full on Thursday. And if obviously Baron Browning misses, Nick Bonitto is going to get the start opposite of Jonathan Cooper, which leaves Drew Sanders in that rotation role. And more than likely what we can expect to see and what Broncos fans can expect to see is that Ronnie Perkins gets elevated from the practice squad once again to the game day roster and will play in that rotation alongside Drew Sanders to fulfill that 4 pass rusher spot that they have here. So some good news here that they could get Bonitto back, and more than likely they will. But the bad news is no Baron Browning, more than likely here for this game on Sunday, as he has not done anything to, I think, even be out there. Like the side field, if he was on the side field, maybe I would say like, okay, but I haven't seen him. So I don't know if that's going to be the case here. Then it was also interesting as well that Justin Simmons popped up on the injury report on Thursday. He missed practice with an illness. Now, I don't think this is something that's going to keep him out, but it was definitely odd to go out there at practice on the second day of the Jarrett Stidham era in Denver. And you're looking around at practice, you're like, I don't see Simmons anywhere. And that's a little bit weird. So obviously there's an illness. You look at Dwayne Washington, running back, special teams ace. He's also battling an illness as well that's held him out 2 consecutive days. So there might be a little bit of a bug that's going around We'll obviously see how Friday's practice kind of plays forth for these guys here, but I don't expect this to impact Justin's availability for Sunday's game against the Chargers. But you did talk about it. You mentioned Marvin Mims did pop up with a hamstring injury, limited participant on Thursday. Is this something that's going to linger? Because what happened is like this was something that could have happened during practice when we didn't necessarily get a chance to see, right? We're out there, we get to watch individual period. And usually limited participation means that they participate in one of those things. Like it's not full. Full means that they participate in stretch, at individual and team period. So maybe he participated a little bit in team, or maybe this happened in team period. So Friday's practice is going to be big for the status on Marvin Mims as well, which look, hey, if Denver and Stidham have to go into Sunday's game against the Chargers without Courtland, without Mims, you know what we better see, Sayre? We better see an elevation of Traquan Smith from the practice squad, and we also better see a lot of targets to Jerry Jeudy on Sunday.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of where a lot of people feel like the offense is going to trend towards anyway, right? Is to Jerry Jeudy. So I guess we're fixing to find out, as Gary Kubiak used to say, what's going to happen in terms of personnel. And speaking of, many people may be wondering, hey, where's Greg Dulcich? He's been a DNP the last couple of days as well. So doubtful to see him out there on Sunday, although, hey, you never know. So I guess we'll find out there. But I think with Jarrett Stidham, Cody, you really would love to see at the very least one of Courtland, Sutton, or Marvin Mims out there, somebody that you can really push the ball to vertically to open up what a lot of people believe we're going to see a lot more action to the middle of the field, a lot more of that intermediate passing game, right? At least that's what you expect in terms of the overall offensive efficiency and kind of just what we've been asking for a lot of this season, right? Or what we've seen or noticed that has been missing from this Broncos offense. You expect them to emphasize that. And in order to have that, you're going to need to have a field stretcher, right? Somebody that can be out there and testing the defense vertically. So hopefully at least one of those two guys can go, if not both of them. It would be great to see Jarrett Stidham with Sutton, Jeudy, and Mims all for his first start of the season.
I agree with you too. And it's tough. Like if Denver's run game is non-existent, that's going to be a problem. And we'll obviously dive a little bit deeper into that here. To your point about Greg Dulcich as well, Sayre, I think at this point, we haven't seen him this week. We haven't seen him on the side field doing anything for the Broncos. So to me, I don't think we're going to see him return at all this year. I think that obviously they opened up his 21-day window a couple weeks ago. You're approaching that time leading up to the Raiders game where it's like, hey, you have to decide is he going to be activated or is he going to go on IR? I don't think he's going to, at this point, especially with Lucas Kroll now on the 53, I don't think we see Greg Dulcich the rest of the season here for the Broncos, which I think really next year puts a lot of pressure on him coming into it. That we know he can play, but the injury history is a concern, and he's going to have to prove to stay healthy if he wants to be on the team going forward. So some things that we all know, like we guarantee this is going to be a wild Broncos offseason. We'll have you covered every single day, every step of the way here on Locked On Broncos. But one thing we are going to dive deep into here on today's episode of the show here, Broncos Country. What do we want to see from the Broncos against the Chargers on offense and on defense? You're going to get all that here on today's brand new episode of the show. Today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at LinkedIn Jobs. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. With the Broncos looking to part ways with Russell Wilson, can they put a LinkedIn ad out there looking for their next quarterback? Certainly a possibility here. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have time or resources to even hire. They even just launched a brand new feature as well that will make things easier, thankfully, through LinkedIn, the process where it becomes intuitive, quick, and easy. Now you can write job descriptions, which makes the process even easier and quicker going forward. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
What do we want to see from the Denver Broncos offense and defense in this game against the Los Angeles Chargers? We've spent a lot of this week talking about what's been going on with Russell Wilson, the quarterback situation, obviously Sean Payton and his comments, the future, all of those sorts of things like that. But we got a game to talk about for this coming weekend, of course. And there are a lot of things to be evaluated in this game. So offensively, defensively, what are you looking forward to? We want to hear from you as well. And we can't thank you, the everyday listener of Locked On Broncos, enough for making us part of your day, however you choose to do so, free and available everywhere that you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube, where you can watch the show and engage in the comments section. Cody, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, what are you looking at in this game? I know it's hasn't really been the focus of this week. We know that it's been upcoming, and we know that the Broncos still have a playoff shot, all these sorts of things right now. But ultimately, it's evaluation time for this team. What are you going to be evaluating for the Broncos on Sunday when they play the Chargers?
I hope we see a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And what I mean by that is that for the Broncos offense specifically, we kind of talked about a little bit when we focused on Jerry Jeudy here and Jarrett Stidham in our previous conversation is, can Jarrett Stidham operate an intermediate passing game here for Denver? Look, Sayre, I believe here now with Jarrett Stidham being put into the starting lineup as the quarterback, what's going to be the biggest difference that we see with how the offense is called with Jarrett versus how it's been called with Russ? We don't know that, right? But I personally expect a brand new look. Not like the offense is going to look entirely different, but I think we're going to see things that, maybe play to him being a pocket passer, to him actually standing and making those middle of the field throws there in the intermediate passing game. Where are we going to actually see route concepts now that are slants, drags? I mean, the digs there. But I think you have to spread your personnel out. I think also that's another thing as well. It's not all on the quarterback here. And this is why I think it's like, okay, how does Sean Payton call a game with Jarrett versus how he's called a game with Russ? Because in my opinion, Denver's personnel at times, when they've brought Adam Troutman in and they've brought Chris Manhertz in at the same time, we all know, Sayre, they're going to run the football, right? And defenses know that. And their looks at that they do, I mean, they don't really hide it. So teams know, hey, it's left hash. This is the personnel. This is the formation. We know exactly what they're going to run. Oh, they move it to the middle. Okay, this is what they're going to run. That has to disappear. And part of me is wondering, are we going to find out a little bit more? Like, did Sean Payton simply just not trust Russell Wilson to execute these plays that he thinks that he can run? Or was he handicapping him a little bit? Do we see Jarrett Stidham do things that Russ hasn't done and not necessarily be an indicator on quarterback style, but maybe even play calling? To me, I think the biggest thing here, the biggest revealing factor is there an intermediate passing game here now that Jarrett Stidham's in the lineup. For me, offensively, that's what I'm looking at. What do you have your eye on here for Denver's offense?
Yeah, I think it's really building off of what you said. I want to see that offensive operation humming, right? You want to see the full gambit, I guess, of the playbook. And I think it's an interesting debate, what you just brought up, or an interesting topic to ponder at the very least, because what was one of the things that we saw and noticed a lot of during that little stretch where the Broncos went 6-2, right? Where they cut back into the playoff mix. We saw a lot of Russell Wilson taking autonomy at the line of scrimmage, making checks, making audibles, calling things at the line of scrimmage, seeing the defense, operating that offense. So it'd be interesting to know, hey, was there not much freedom there? Or did the Broncos limit the playbook with his inability to really operate from a traditional drop back sense? I think that is going to be fascinating to see in this game. Are we going to see a lot more of these longer developing pass plays in the offense with Jarrett Stidham? Are we going to truly see him step up in the pocket? Are we going to see more issues with pass protection? A lot of people, Cody, I mean, they're going to be fascinated to see, because there's a lot of blame that goes to the offensive line, right? I mean, when you're talking about Russell Wilson, a lot of people say, well, the O-line doesn't block for him. He's getting sacked too many times. Are we going to see that same type of stuff with Jarrett Stidham, or are we going to see him be able to hang in the pocket and make throws? Are we going to see the offensive line? I mean, there's just so many other questions that build off of the overall offensive operation looking better. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing. And defensively, I want to see the Broncos be aggressive. I want to see them create takeaways. I don't want to see a team that looks defeated after you bench the quarterback. Of course, that does affect these guys. They're human beings, right?
Yeah.
And we know that there's a human element to this. But we talk about it all the time. When you're facing teams with interim head coaches just after they fired a coach, you often see just kind of like this burst of emotion and energy from a team. Can that carry over and apply to the Broncos now that you've benched your starting quarterback? It's going to be fascinating to see.
Well, Denver got a little bit of action too defensively against Easton Stick in that game. Obviously, they knocked Herbert out of the game. Unfortunately, he suffered that season-ending injury, which is unfortunate for the Chargers there, and kind of speaks to their luck and where things are at. But I remember Easton Stick also came in and delivered some strikes to Quentin Johnston downfield. I think more than likely you and Daniel talked about this on the crossover. Keenan Allen probably not expected to play in this game and probably not smart to play him in this game, especially as the Chargers are facing a lot of different decisions. But, I mean, that LA team, we saw it. Like, I guess we did see it here after they got blown out the way that they did by the Raiders and they made the change. You talk about the interim head coach presence. Was that just a carryover for that Buffalo Bills game where the Chargers, they had control of that game? They honestly should have won that game, but then they chargered and let it get away from them late overall. Can Denver's defense, and this is where my shift kind of focuses here, kind of to the aggressive nature, right? Can Denver pressure Easton Stick? Like, to me, that's a question that I have here because for the last 2 weeks against Jared Goff and against Bailey Zappi, Denver couldn't do much to really fluster those guys, and they were efficient, and they carved Denver up. They didn't have success necessarily on third down, though the Lions did. A lot of the chunk plays against the Broncos defense have come on first and second down, which has hurt them, and it hasn't been third down. So can Denver find a way to get pressure on Easton Stick? What is the coverage going to look like? Like, obviously, you want to, I think, have a bounce-back game for Patrick Surtain. He had a rough game against the Patriots, and what is that game plan going to look like? Who's going to get into the, involved in the mix here? Josh Palmer back for them. You obviously have Jalen Guyton. You have Quentin Johnston. There's just, for me, it's how does Denver's defense respond? Because, look, they weren't the reason that they lost to the Patriots, but they did get gashed in a couple of big moments where they needed to get stops, and unfortunately, that cost them a game against the Patriots, even though they shouldn't have been in that position if the offense were able to take care of their responsibility. So can Patrick Surtain bounce back this week after a little bit of a rough game overall? And how does Denver do that? I think a lot of it comes with getting pressure on the quarterback, which, we all know is paramount. Good news, Nick Benito's back this week. He was one of the best guys at that. He was the leading sack artist until Jonathan Cooper got a 7.5 sack against the Patriots last week. So now you have Benito at 7. He still leads the team in tackles for a loss behind the line of scrimmage. And he was getting good pressure early on in that Chargers game before he suffered that injury. So can you amplify that? Can you get pressure? To me, that's going to be one of the bigger keys here defensively.
Yeah, I can't wait to see. He's just a couple of big games, maybe even against the Chargers, Cody. He could get up to double-digit sacks, which would be really cool to see for Nick Benito. But you're absolutely right. That pass rush has to be on point, especially without Baron Browning out there potentially as he's in the concussion protocol, like you mentioned earlier. I think we've got to see attacking from all angles. We've got to see more of the Jaquan McMillan blitzes. We've got to see more of just the Broncos getting everybody involved some way or another to really fluster Easton Stick and force him to make as quick of decisions as possible. Because if that ball is coming out early, the Broncos are going to be able to be the aggressor on the back end, and that plays directly into the favor and I think the strength overall of this defense.
We'll see what the Broncos' mindset is. Can they find a way? This wasn't necessarily a firing of a coach in a way that galvanizes interim head coaches and teams to be inspired to play. But after the benching of Russell Wilson, will we see an inspired Broncos team come out and play on Sunday? That's a big question. But what needs to happen here in the final 2 weeks that Denver has? I feel like this is an important conversation that we haven't had a chance to talk about enough. We're going to break that down here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at DoorDash. Time to pull out your Lucky Charm jersey and order your favorite apps and snacks on DoorDash because it's football season again. DoorDash has all of your local favorites and national favorites, and they can deliver it directly to your doorstep. And on top of that, they can even deliver your groceries to you on game day. So if there's something you need for a little bit of a pregame meal, a pregame appetizer, you don't have everything, but you don't want to run to the store, you can DoorDash it, and they can deliver it directly to your doorstep. You can order pizza, wings, soda, burgers, or even just buns on DoorDash, and you can get it all delivered without missing the game. One of my local favorites that I like here in the Denver area that I get DoorDash to me quite a bit is Teriyaki Badness. I always get the double chicken. I get the regular chicken and the spicy chicken and a whole thing of rice. I get it extra protein pack delivered to my doorstep, and that's how I enjoy sometimes my game days when Denver's on the road, and I'll get that through the DoorDash app. So score football's season's best deals on groceries, restaurants, retail, and more. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23. Once again, that's 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and you enter code LOCK23. Subject to change. Terms apply. Today's Locked On Broncos is also brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. And as you all know it, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And as the weather outside gets colder, especially in the Denver area, we just recovered from a snowstorm here, and it's still cold outside. Even though it's cold, the NFL, they offer to stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. If you believe that the Broncos are going to beat the Chargers on Sunday and you place $5 on the money line when you sign up as a new customer, if they win, you'll get $150 in bonus bets. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now with the NFL approaching the playoffs, NBA on the hardwood, and NHL on the ice. They have you covered with everything that you need to know. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads. For this weekend's game for the Broncos and the Chargers, the Broncos are 3.5-point favorites despite the fact that they benched Russell Wilson. Can they cover? Can they take care of business at home? They have player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. As we jump into the fourth quarter here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, real quick, wanted to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. You can get Locked On Broncos for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So thank you once again, Broncos Country, all the everydayers out there for making this show exactly what it is. We wouldn't do it. We wouldn't be where we're at without you. We appreciate you so much, all the discourse, all the discussion. And make sure if you're watching on YouTube, you interact with other members of Broncos Country on the things that make you passionate about this football team. Sayre, 2 weeks left here in the regular season, and obviously this was a big week for the Broncos. A lot of news coming out about the benching of Russell Wilson, which kind of changed, I think, maybe our optics and our opinion on, okay, hey, what do we want to see from them in these next 2 weeks? I still see it on social media. I'm not sure what your interactions are like, but there are a lot of fans that are like, well, Denver still has a chance at the playoffs. Like, folks, like, to me, I don't even think you can think about the playoffs right now. I don't even think the Broncos are even thinking about it. And I think that Sean Payton making the move that he did to go to Jarrett Stidham signifies that, hey, we're not going to make the playoffs this season. Sean wants to see what his offense can actually look like with Jarrett Stidham and maybe what Jarrett Stidham's skill set has, the things that they kind of envision for. So for me, I think the focus has to go entirely away from the playoffs. While Denver has a mathematical chance, it's very unlikely. They need to win this weekend. They need other teams to win and not have any exceptions in week 17. And then everything needs to go right in week 18. And Denver has to win in week 18. That's asking a lot. Like, that's playing the lottery. And I'm sure if you were to try to put that scenario together, it might actually work out for you. If it actually goes off, you might win a lot of money. You might be able to retire with FanDuel. But I think the playoff conversation has to go away. It's not happening this year, Sayre. I don't believe it's going to happen. But I think it may be something you look at next season. What do we want to see here in these final 2 weeks?
Well, we want to see the Broncos get to 9-8, right? I mean, regardless of playoff chances or things like that, I think that a lot of times, you see a lot of the talk about, well, the Broncos need to lose these final 2 games and get better draft positioning. No, I think at this point, you want to see the team get to 9-8. You want to see the improvement from the roster. I mean, we're not talking about the difference of picking 10th or 1st overall. We're not talking about the difference of picking, even up in the top 5 or even in like the top 12 necessarily. We'll see what happens there. But man, I would rather see the Broncos finish 9-8 and be picking somewhere 17 or 18 as opposed to finishing 7 and 10 and be picking 14 or 15, right? I mean, what's the difference between those spots? I mean, if you really want to trade up for a guy, go ahead and do that. But
Payton's done that before too.
And he consistently has looked into trading up, and he's very aggressive in terms of trading up. So expect wherever the Broncos land in the draft, I think you might expect them to trade up anyway. So don't worry about where they finish in the draft order necessarily. I want to see this team get to 9-8, Cody. I want to see them play well under Jarrett Stidham. I want to see them get above 500. It would be the first above 500 record since that 2016 season when Trevor Siemian was the primary quarterback that year. And look, I think there's a lot to be gleaned from the evaluation that comes from these final 2 games, right? Not just with Jarrett Stidham, but other players that could be part of your core and your future going forward. And I think this is a great opportunity for the Broncos to see, can you win with some of these guys that you're going to be building around after this season?
It's a great question. And I think it also, maybe we should revisit something we talked about a few weeks ago here on the show when Denver was still in the playoff hunt, essentially here. We talked about, okay, hey, like Denver has a chance, worst case scenario, you want to finish 9-8, right? When we look at, I think, like the remaining 4 games of the schedule, and then obviously some things in the AFC haven't worked out in favor where Denver, has wanted it to. So 9-8, it's still a winning record. It's a step in the right direction. And we also felt like, we talked about this before the benching of Russell Wilson. We said, okay, even if Denver doesn't make the playoffs, is this season still a success? I think in a lot of areas it is, Sayre. But now with this changing of the guard, with the benching of Russell Wilson, and even if Denver, let's say they lose these next 2 games or win these next 2 games, Are you more confident about the Broncos heading into the offseason as maybe we would be if this never happened and, Russ was, playing solid and didn't get benched? Like, I think the conversation looks different because now we don't know what's coming here for the Broncos because Sean Payton, he made his bed here with the Russell Wilson situation. And obviously for him, he feels like this isn't going to work. But that puts a lot of pressure on him. Now he's got to get it right. He's got to find the solution because what we had once talked about as the Broncos are a quarterback away. Well, they're a little bit more than quarterback away, but they're going to need a quarterback next year, and we have no idea how the hell they're going to do it.
Yeah, it's going to be another fun offseason for us, right? One or the other, right? For you and I mean, it's either the head coach, the quarterback, or both every offseason. So certainly not bad for content creators like Cody and I, but it's really, frustrating for all of Broncos country to say, hey, we would love to have the stability. We'd love to be going into the offseason talking about how we're going to build around this quarterback and this head coach and have that brain trust together. But look, the Broncos are just in that spot once again. I don't even want to say, though, that they're in QB purgatory because I think you do have one of the two major pieces that you need to have success in the NFL. I know he's maybe not the most popular guy right now, but I do think the Broncos have the right head coach in Sean Payton. I think we're going to see over these final 2 weeks that he's going to be able to win with whoever he decides is going to be that quarterback. I mean, even with the Russell situation finishing the way that it has right now, we've talked about how at its best, we saw this team go on a stretch of games where they were 6-2, right? So they've been able to win games. They've been able to have success. What can happen if Sean has the right guy out there to operate his offense? I think that's the major disconnect right now is that you're trying to meld the greatest hits, right? What Sean Payton said, get those Russell Wilson greatest hits and let him do his thing. We've seen kind of how that can work over the course of a season. I don't think it's sustainable, but it did bring Russell Wilson back into the conversation of like, man, yeah, he wasn't done as of last season, right? So I think for the Broncos, it's now finding that new point guard. Who's going to be your new point guard? You don't need Michael Jordan. You don't need LeBron James. You need a point guard, somebody who can operate your offense, somebody that can make everybody around them better. Cody, you and I were talking about this off the air. The 49ers are having incredible success with Brock Purdy, and I don't mean that as a slight to Brock Purdy. What I mean is that if you find the right guy to distribute the ball, to be accurate, to be on time, to make plays when needed, to not make a ton of mistakes, you can have a lot of success in today's NFL. And I think that's what the Broncos desperately need is somebody that can be that point guard for the offense.
And I think right now, too, I see a split amongst the fan base that there's a large portion of the fan base that is mad at Sean Payton. They don't have a lot of trust in him. And quite frankly, I've had a lot of fans tell me they don't like Sean Payton. But then there's also fans that are like, you know what? I want to see what this is going to be like. I have trust that he can maybe find the right guy, though he never has really had a history of ever developing a young quarterback. Is never going to be put in that situation here with Payton. I think how the Broncos do in these next two games and how we see the offense maybe evolve a little bit around Jarrett Stidham and maybe Sean Payton's plan going forward, that's going to maybe buy some trust back or lose even more trust here. So how does Sean Payton navigate these next 2 weeks? I think is a big storyline that we'll follow here on Locked On Broncos. But Broncos Country, that'll wrap up today's episode of the show. We appreciate you so much for tuning in, rocking with us once again. As we mentioned at the top of the show, the Broncos are hoping in Sunday's game, Jarrett Stidham is going to get stiddy with it. And hopefully you can carry that over onto social media. If he's throwing touchdowns, he's lighting up bombs, you can say that, hey, you got it here, Locked On Broncos, make it a thing, trademark it, whatever you want to do here. But we appreciate you so much for making us part of your routine every single day on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. The next time you're going to see Sayre, Bedinger, and myself, this could be for the Locked On Broncos postgame report on New Year's Eve. Will the Broncos leave Sunday's game with a win? That's a big question, and that's a hope here in Broncos Country. We'll see you then.